Good evening. The special meeting for the Annapolis City Council on Monday, January the 23rd will be called to order at 7:05 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Arnett, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask us all to take a moment of silence to collect our thoughts as we do the city's business. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panalidi,
Present.
Alderman Budge,
Here.
Alderman Payne,
Present.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles,
Here.
Alderwoman Finlayson,
Present.
Alderman Lippman,
Present.
Alderman Kirby, Alderman Pfeiffer,
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Abstain.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the first item on our agenda?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. The first item on the agenda is the approval of agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended to remove the City Site Council citation for David Jarrell of Public Works as he's not able to be here tonight. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with the quarterly report from the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis.
We were notified earlier that Richard Walton, the executive director, was sick and couldn't be here, so they canceled on us. So we're going to skip that portion of the agenda. Next is reports by committee. Is there any alder person that would like to present a report? Alderman Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Environmental Matters met on the 19th. We were very pleased with your appointment of John Turgeon to the Environmental Commission. Very impressive resume, and I think he'll be a fine addition. The committee voted unanimously to recommend. We also got an update on the Forest Conservation Act, and in particular, want to call out that we started talking about how the department, this is Planning and Zoning, is handling having the new Forest Conservation Act, and they are implementing the new Forest Conservation Act. We're still waiting for the handbook. I think they had 6 months, so we'll be coming up on that deadline soon. Not worried that they'll have problems meeting it. I think they're still getting into the habit of complying with some of the deadlines and notice requirements that we added in, and so I think we'll just need to make sure we stay on top of, are they posting things to the website, are they maintaining the email list and some of the other notice requirements. So it's, I think, a little, it's not going perfectly, but nothing that I'm terribly concerned about, something that we'll just need to keep an eye on.
Is there anyone else? Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. The Public Safety Committee the date has changed again. The Public Safety Committee this month will be held on the 28th at 5 p.m. here in Council Chambers. And Mr. Mayor, if I might, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege to say thank you to our public safety team for their work over the weekend. And thank you for the organizers of the Women's March that was held in Annapolis on Saturday. I was in D.C., and so I wasn't here to support all of our women, but yes. So thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the participants. Our work has just begun. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Mr. City Attorney? Alderman Pam?
The Economic Matters Committee will also meet, at least it's tentatively set for the 28th of February at 6:30 p.m. here in Council Chambers. We will review pending legislation at that time. It is open to the public, and I would invite everyone that is interested to be here. Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
During comments by the general public, you may speak about anything not already on the calendar for a public hearing. First two people signed up to speak are Denise Robinson and Stephen Kahn. And if you could state your name and address for the record when you go to testify.
My first time. My name is Denise Robinson. I live at 523 2nd Street. And I want to talk about an incident that happened to me on Monday, January 9th. I was homesick, and I was alone, and I was in the shower when somebody entered my apartment. Now, I don't know about you, but you are most vulnerable when you're alone and in the shower. I called the police department and told them someone had been in my apartment. I was alone. I was scared. Please send someone out. 30 minutes later, the Annapolis Police Department arrived. Oh, I did not go back to my phone. Sorry. 30 minutes after my call, the police department arrived. They asked me if I saw the person in my apartment, if they had done any harm to me, and if they had taken anything. I was scared, I was shaking, and I said, I don't know, I haven't looked, but I know they were in here because my door's open, the blanket's ajar. That's all I can tell you right now. The response I got from them, since I did not see anybody, since I did not know anybody had stolen anything, there was no crime committed, they were not magicians, there was nothing they can do. I did not rate a business card, I did not rate a police report. What I rated was, thank you very much. If they come back and enter your home, please call us again. They then left my apartment. They were so concerned about me, which granted I was glad. They drove to Port Annapolis to speak to my boyfriend and said, your girlfriend is extremely shaken. Please go home and make sure nothing else happens to her this afternoon. Thereby giving their duty to my boyfriend. Now, one, there was a crime committed. When he entered my home, that's called burglary. I don't know, but I would think that should be tracked. I also know across the street from me, there was a break-in and robbery. There was a car stolen. If anybody knows, back in the summer on Chester Avenue, there was a home invasion where a woman was bound. There was a lot of crime, and yet a lot of it isn't being reported because we're told if we don't see the person who's doing it, if nothing was taken it, we rate nothing. So I think somebody needs to do some accounting and to be tracked, because in order to track crime, you have to know what's going on. So that's all I'm going to say, the police department. And one, I think I'm worth something. I think I'm valuable, at least a business card, not thank you very much, we're going to see you later. And that's all I have to say, sorry.
Ma'am, let me be the first to say, I apologize for what you went through. That's no reflection of the Annapolis Police Department. And I will personally follow up to make sure nobody else goes through. I want to thank you for coming by today to let us know about this. Alderman Pan?
Do you know who the officer was?
No, it was a male and a female. He had an accent, and they didn't even give me their cards. And nothing. I know nothing about them. And to be honest, I was too shaken. I wasn't thinking. I'm just like somebody.
No, I understand. This was January 9th?
Monday, January 9th.
About what time?
I believe I called about 12:15. It was in the afternoon.
Alderwoman.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you. 523 2nd Street. Correct.
You don't want to.
Okay. She gave her address when.
And I have it for you.
Oh, sorry. I don't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
523 2nd Street.
Stephen Kahn.
Hey, my name is Stephen Kahn. I live at 1111 Van Buren Street, and this kind of stems off of what Denise just gave testimony to. I had read about her experience on our Eastport Neighborhood Forum, which is where we communicate a lot of our issues that happens over in Eastport. And I, too, experienced something earlier in the summer where I had solicitors on my back deck. They were knocking on my door. I went out back to see what was going on. I noticed certain things on my back deck, on my coffee table. I said, I'm sorry, I'm working from home right now, don't have time for this. They left. A little bit later, I went back downstairs. Property from my back deck was taken. So I went around to McKinley Street, tracked them down, said, if you don't give me back my property, I'm going to be calling the police right now. They said, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't know what you're talking about. So I called the police as well. And this is nothing against the officers on the street. I mean, I respect our officers. They're our first line of defense between criminals. They're protecting us, everything. But they said, well, wait in front of that house where you're at right now. Meanwhile, the solicitors kind of made their way out of my eyesight. It took the cops a little while to come around. They said that they had searched them at the entrance to Van Buren Street where I live. They didn't find my property on them. I said, well, this is the route where they took after they left my eyesight, as I was instructed to wait here at this home where I had called from, the address where I had called from. I said, but if you look in the bushes, you'll probably see it there after I first approached them. And they said, we don't have time for that. And so I said, okay, great. So I walked my dog. My fraternity brother came out with me. We went down both sides of the street. We found my property in the bushes. So I called back and I said, hey, they were just out here. They said that they had searched the individuals. They didn't find my property on them, but now I found it here. Do y'all want to send somebody back out here? So it was about 45 or so minutes. The responding officers showed back up, and they said, well, did you see them take this property? And I said, well, no, of course not. And they said, well, then we can't do anything about it. There's nothing that we can do for you. And I said, but here it is. The solicitors were on my back deck. I called y'all to report it. That's the route that they took after they left my line of sight. My main concern is we all read about how crime is going down in Annapolis. So whenever I read Denise's account of actually her home being, somebody entering the home, it raised a red flag to me, and it kind of made me think back to my experience where I too had property taken from my porch. It was really small. It was a candle or a light or something. And, I mean, very insignificant in value, but still small crimes start off to be bigger things later on down the road. These people got away scot-free, right? So my main concern is, again, where we read how crime is on the downward spiral or whatever, but we're all still living here. We kind of, expect more of a credibility or something when crime happens to us. And, we can pretty much say without a reasonable doubt, sure, a little neighborhood kid could have come around. I've never had anything disappear from my house. These people are on my back porch. 30 minutes later, I go to find it missing. It would be a great coincidence if it wasn't them, right? But since they told me, you didn't see him take it, no, of course I didn't. So now I've gone out and bought video cameras and all this hoopla for my house, and I feel like I'm living in, Fort Knox or whatever you want to call it. I don't think that's right. So I think that we need to reevaluate, and look how we track crime and what's being reported, what citizens have a right to have reported if they do experience a crime on their property, and how that's taken into account with our figures. That's what I wanted to come in and just kind of echo what Denise had, mentioned about her experience as well, with it not being reported just because you didn't see him take it, can't do anything. I mean, we read about cars being, having a purse removed from an unlocked vehicle or whatever. Those are in the police report, but those people didn't see him take it either. So what's the difference between that crime and my crime? There isn't one, really. Why wasn't mine reported and accredited to actual theft?
Any comments? We will follow up on this as well. Thank you for coming by.
All right, have a good night.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to testify? Now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare comments by the general public closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is update from the mayor.
All right. I have three things I want to update the public about that have been going on. The first, as many of you know, is the Nitro Circus with Travis Pastrana. I went door to door with Mr. Pastrana for 3 hours, actually on the first day that it snowed, to hear what the residents had to say. And the first 8 people we talked to with the media all said yes. And they actually had about 400 people sign a petition, with overwhelming support. We've got probably the most social media interactions we've ever had, and a number of people emailing us as well. Just wanted to let you know that Alderman Paone and I are meeting with Mr. Pastrana and some members of the community as well, and I will keep you updated on how that is going. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the flag down at City Dock. Anybody who read the Capital newspaper saw what took place. The city flew a flag that was somewhat rattled. Nobody's more upset about that than I am. And I'm going to make sure it never happens again. We've ordered new flags, and there's a policy in place. If a flag's deteriorated, there's a proper ceremony to replace it. And I want to thank the citizens who not only wrote into the newspaper, but wrote into us to let us know about it. Many times we rely on the public to let us know if a parking meter's not working, if a bus doesn't run on time, if there's something wrong with one of your bills or a pothole. We rely on you. So thank you to the people who wrote that in. Final point is on HACA, the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis. I think we all saw that they had misspent $3 million in federal funds and they're going to have to pay it back. And while I'm confident in the members of the board I've appointed, I'm also extremely disappointed and upset at the events that took place. I think the most important thing is someone is held accountable. It's one thing to misuse people's money and pay it back. It's another thing to find out who did it and who's going to be held responsible. So I will continue reaching out to federal, other elected officials to make sure that the person who committed these crimes and misuse of money will be held accountable. And that concludes my update. Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is appointments and reappointments, beginning with AP-25-16, the reappointment of John Smith to the Human Relations Commission.
Is there a motion to approve AP 2516, the reappointment of John Smith to the Human Relations Commission?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is AP-31-16, the appointment of Jerry Williams to the Human Relations Commission.
Is there a motion to approve AP 3116, Jerry Williams to the Human Relations Commission?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is AP-01-17, the appointment of John Turgeon to the Environmental Commission.
Is there a motion to approve the appointment of John Turgeon, AP 0117?
So moved.
Any discussion? Alderman Arnett?
Mr. Mayor, I do think that we're going through this very quickly, but we really need to be thankful to all of the citizens who volunteer their time. Boards and commissions, as we know, can go just as long as council meetings, sometimes even longer and sometimes even more acrimonious. So, and they get paid even less than we do. So we really, we do appreciate it. We take the appointments seriously. We're always overwhelmed by the absolute fabulous quality of the people that we have volunteering. And so just because we're shotgunning through this legislation does not mean that we don't know what you do and how much we appreciate what you do.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar.
Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Is there a second? Any discussion? Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panladies,
Aye.
Alderman Arnett,
Aye.
Alderman Budge,
Aye.
Alderman Payon,
Aye.
Alderman Pendel Charles,
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson,
Aye.
Alderman Littman,
Aye.
Alderman Kirby, Alderman Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on our agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing, beginning with Ordinance O-1-17, non-discrimination foreign-born residents.
There's a number of people signed up to speak, so I would ask that we could all keep it to 5 minutes and state your name and the address for the record. The first 3 people signed up to speak are Walt Pelcher, Maya Lemendez, and Mark Rodriguez.
Good evening, folks, and if you don't mind, I'm going to wear my sunglasses. I recently had surgery, and these are far more comfortable on my nose than my regular reading glasses, so it's not with any disrespect meant, but they're readers. My name is Walt Fletcher. I live at 3206 Elliott Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. I've been a long-time resident here, in fact, over 20 years at this point. I currently live in Bay Highlands, and as such, I'm Our neighboring community is Highland Beach, which is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, African-American incorporated city in the nation. Although I'm not a resident of downtown Annapolis itself, of the city per se, living just outside the lines, I spend a great deal of my time and discretionary income with the businesses that we love to enjoy here in the city of Annapolis. My wife and I are members of Surge Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, and I'm here speaking in favor of the non-discrimination of foreign-born residents ordinance. Yesterday, the Capitol had the article about this meeting, and Mayor Panelides, your quote in that article is the reason I'm speaking here tonight. You quoted, referring to the ordinance by saying, it's a national thing we're getting caught up in. And Mr. Mayor, I absolutely agree with you. This is absolutely a national thing. It is important to all of us. One of the things I did, just as reference, my wife and I, about 13 years ago, sorry for those who can't see it that far, but we adopted our son from the Philippines at age 7. And as you can tell, he is not white. And as such, he's encountered, as we have as his parents, different issues along the way where he was profiled because he wasn't white, because he was brown. So this issue is very important to us at a personal level, having experienced it. Secondly, I'd also like to state on the official record that profiling of any sort shouldn't be accepted here in our capital. And as I said, from a personal experience, I know this does indeed happen here. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. It's unfortunately a natural consequence of some things. My wife and I are very proud of the son that we have raised and have done the best that we can to help him navigate these issues so that he's aware and knows how to respond and present himself accordingly. Not everybody has that that benefit. And my son, being Filipino, has on many occasions been mistaken for other. And that's just an unfortunate byproduct of where we are. We haven't quite, as a nation, moved to where we should be, where we deserve to be, where all of us deserve to be treated equally, regardless of where we were originally born. At the end of the day, none of us are American Indians, so we're all immigrants from one side or another. And I would just ask that we all keep that in mind when we keep this proposed legislation as it comes up for discussion. Thank you all very much. And if there's any questions, otherwise, I will relinquish.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Madaí Ledesma.
Good evening, my name is Madaí Ledesma.
Nosotros llegamos aquí a Maryland por medio del trabajo de mi marido.
We moved to Maryland for my husband's work.
Y el que era su patrón en el 2006 le ofreció vivir aquí en Annapolis porque era una ciudad segura.
And in 2006 we moved to Annapolis because it was a safe city.
Entonces, nos movimos aquí y sí vimos que era una comunidad segura, pero también nos tuvimos que mover de Annapolis porque queríamos algo que fuera más seguro para nosotros.
When we moved here, we saw that yes, it was a safe city, but after a time we had to move because we saw things that were happening that made us unsafe.
Estamos también ahorita pensando en movernos acá si fuera un poco más seguro.
And now we're thinking about moving back to Annapolis because we're thinking that it might be a little more safe.
Porque yo tengo una hija que nació aquí en Annapolis.
My daughter, who's here with me tonight, was born here in Annapolis.
Y ella tiene un poco que decir.
And she has something to tell you.
My name is Heather Pina. I was born July 4. I'm not safe because when I say the Pledge of Allegiance, when I say
The last part, is that the part you're talking about? See that side?
When I say the liberty and justice for all,
Her mom was telling us that every time she says the Pledge of Allegiance in school, she thinks about liberty for justice for all, liberty and justice for all, and thinks about, does that really include my parents? So that's why they're here this evening. ¿Algo más para decir?
No, es solamente que quisiéramos que siguiera siendo, no nada más Annapolis, sino todo Maryland, un estado seguro para todos nosotros.
So we're here tonight in support of the bill. We hope that not just the city of Annapolis, but the whole state of Maryland becomes a safe place for immigrants.
Sí, porque nuestros hijos siempre están con esa inseguridad.
Because our children live with this insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Rodriguez, 225 Chatham Lane, for the record. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I would like to start up by walking through the community and stakeholder engagement process that took place for the non-discrimination of foreign-born residents ordinance. We started working on this legislation over 6 months ago as a result of the City Council work session held in June of 2016, titled Identifying the Needs of the Growing Hispanic Latino Population from the Annapolis City Government, where 11 community representatives testified on behalf of our new American families from various perspectives, which included health, education, business, public safety, and nonprofits. This ordinance was originally based on similar legislation passed in Baltimore City in 2012 and adapted and modified for Annapolis after several working meetings that included the Annapolis Police Department, the Fire Department, the City Manager, and the City Attorney's Office. But most importantly, with input based on the direct needs and challenges faced by our immigrant population and for the benefit of all Annapolitans. The need for this legislation was identified long before the outcome of the presidential election was determined. It is not a reactive measure to the current national political landscape. I would also like to take this opportunity to clarify something regarding opposition to the ordinance. Although some residents of Annapolis may respectfully oppose this legislation for their own personal reasons, it was brought to my attention that many not well thought out emails were sent to City Council members opposing this ordinance, which was organized by a group called the Federation for American Immigration Reform. To be clear, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR as they are known, is an anti-immigrant organization that the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated a hate group since 2008 because of its virulent and false attacks on non-white immigrants. The Federation for American Immigration Reform is a group which has one mission: to severely limit immigration into the United States. FAIR leaders have ties to white supremacist groups and eugenicists and have made many racist statements. FAIR's founder, John Tanton, has expressed his wish that America remain a majority white population, a goal to be achieved, presumably, by limiting the number of non-whites who enter the country. I'm confident that as public servants, our city officials recognize that by protecting the rights and well-being of immigrant families, we build trust in law enforcement and other public agencies, thus enhancing public safety for all. As you know, justice cannot be served when a victim of domestic violence or a witness to a shooting does not call the police because she fears that doing so will attract the attention of officials who wish to deport her family members. That's why standing together in this time of uncertainty is our most effective tool for keeping our communities safe. We look forward to addressing any legal concerns the city attorney may have during the committee meeting, and I respectfully urge you to vote in favor of the non-discrimination of foreign-born residents ordinance and stand with all Annapolitans. Thank you.
The next three people signed up to speak: Delegate Carlo Sanchez, Joseph McFarland, and Michael Keller. And in the future, if everyone could please write their address on here. Thank you.
For the record, Carlos Sanchez, I guess I reside here for 3 months at 6 Bladen Street. I am a state delegate. I represent District 47B, Prince George's County. It's the state's first and only Latino majority district. It's actually the home for me. I was born there. I grew up there before my parents had the opportunity to buy their home. And when the time came for me to buy my home, my own house, that was home. So I wanted to go back to that. It's an area that Langley Park, if I say it, you know it's one of the biggest Salvadoran communities in the entire country. And so I think what's of value here to speak of is the story of how I ended up there. My parents are from El Salvador. They were born there, and in the 70s there was a civil war that was brewing. And so they were in their mid-20s, and they decided to get out and leave, knowing that more than likely it would be a deadly civil war, which it was, and it lasted 30 years. On top of that, they wanted to have an opportunity, if they ever did have a family and children, to give their children a chance to, succeed and live good lives. So they came here to this country. They didn't know each other. One went to Texas, the other to California. Eventually they settled here in Maryland where they had family. There they met, they fell in love, they got married, they had me. So that was probably the best decision they ever made. Based on some complications during my birth, I was the only child they would ever have together. And so my parents made it their goal and their mission in life to ensure that I would have every opportunity to succeed. I think back on it now, and I'm embarrassed of myself, because as a teenager, I'm sure we've all gone through it. As a teenager, I was a little rough with my parents. And my mother took on extra jobs all the time to put me through private school, because she was scared that the environment that I was growing up in would be difficult, and I may not make it out. And you can't blame her for that. So she took on jobs. One of the jobs that she had that embarrassed me at the time, she would clean the houses of some of my classmates in the school. And I would get angry at her because I didn't like her doing that, because I felt embarrassed in school. As I grew older and I started going to college, and that journey took a while as well, and they were very patient with me, what I realized was that they had always meant to do the best for me possible, right? They had always wanted to give me everything. See, the thing is, my parents had come here undocumented. It wasn't until Reagan passed his Amnesty Act in '86, when I was 5 years old, that they were able to, for the first time, apply for a legal status here in this country. They had to wait, the requisite 7 years to become citizens, but as permanent residents, they bought their first home. As soon as they could become citizens, my mother became a citizen immediately to be able to vote in the '92 election. My father, stubborn as he is, just like me, waited a few extra years so he could vote for the election in '96. My father ended up working for a military contractor in Kuwait and Afghanistan and Iraq, hauling diesel fuel for the forward operating bases. During our mission and our time there in Iraq, he spent about 6 years there. He never once wavered in his support for this country, neither has my mother. And on October 30th of 2015, 2 originally undocumented immigrants from El Salvador were able to see their son sworn in here at the capital of Maryland as a state delegate. That moment for me was gratifying, obviously for personal reasons, but much more so because I was able to provide something to my parents, a sense of accomplishment that they were able to achieve it. Now, afterwards, I was looking at pictures one day of the event, and I looked at the pictures, and my mother wasn't smiling in the pictures. And so I asked her afterwards, I said, "Mom, why weren't you smiling in those pictures?" And she told me, "Son, in that moment, I couldn't believe that this country could be so great that no matter where we came from, no matter how we got here, our child born here would have an opportunity to be a part of this government." What this ordinance does is it creates an opportunity for children like the little girl that we just heard to be able to have every opportunity to succeed. She has every right as an American citizen. All that she wants is to be with her parents. We can always look at negative and examples of people who obviously do not deserve the right to be here. I have grown up my entire life knowing that I can be judged easily by the skin of, by the color of my skin, but I'm much more than that. And what you have an opportunity to do when you vote on this ordinance is to tell the other residents of Annapolis that you won't judge them that same way either. So I hope you vote in favor of this ordinance, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. My name's Joseph McFarland. I'm resident of 1187 Palmwood Court, Arnold, Maryland. I'm the Chief Academic Officer of St. John's College, and I'm here tonight to read a statement on behalf of the President of St. John's College, Christopher Nelson. Mr. Nelson's resident of 212 Norwood Road. He's been president of St. John's, as you may know, for 25 years. He's in the last year of his tenure in service to the community here. And he asked me, he would have been here tonight, except for he's recuperating from a procedure. Recuperating very well, but still. So on his behalf, I'll just read his statement. I applaud the Annapolis City Council for considering an ordinance designed to reflect the city's character, welcoming to its foreign-born residents, and assuring them that they'll be treated by the city the same as individuals born in the United States. The ordinance under consideration respects federal authority in matters related to immigration enforcement, while acknowledging that the city's very different interests lie in building and supporting a community that has confidence and trust in its local officials to protect all of its residents, irrespective of their place of origin. Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Mr. McFarland, I think I can speak for my colleagues and say that we would like to extend our heartfelt thank you to Mr. Nelson for all that he's done for St. John's College, all the thousands of students who've come through there, and for the city as a whole. He's been a great partner. We're going to miss him. We're jealous because he's going off into, his retirement. But I just want to say thank you, and I think we all would like to say thank you. I mean, this speaks to him sending you here tonight to speak on his behalf. So please, for us, tell him that we said thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm very happy to hear it. Thank you. I will pass that on.
Is Michael Keller here? There he is.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, my name is Michael Keller. I live at 310 Riverview Avenue in Ward 8. And I speak to you this evening in my capacity as chair of the City Human Relations Commission and on behalf of the Commission. The Commission supports the proposed ordinance and believes that it will encourage greater engagement between foreign-born Annapolis residents and city agencies. There is no good reason for city officials to question a person's immigration status in most circumstances. Doing so will erode trust with the growing immigrant population in our community. Involvement of the city police, in particular, in immigration enforcement will have a chilling effect on cooperation with officers in crime investigations. A 2009 report by the Police Foundation concluded that, and I quote, "Without this cooperation, law enforcement will have difficulty apprehending and successfully prosecuting criminals, thus reducing overall public safety for the larger community," end of quote. Many immigrants come from countries in which the police are not the friend of citizens. We do not want this mindset to be hardened here. The application of federal immigration law and the cost associated with it needs to rest with federal authorities. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people signed up to speak: William Rao, Don Quinn, and Lee Finney.
Mr. Mayor, esteemed council persons, thank you for having me. I'm speaking on behalf of the Caucus of African American Leaders, and we are in support of the amendments. I also wanted to state that culture is important, so I'm glad to hear all that I've heard today, because a lot of times we demonize immigrant populations by assuming that they are all predisposed to violence and that they are all preternaturally in poverty. And so that's a stigma and a stereotype that I want to, kind of dispel here today, that this population we're talking about in Annapolis in particular are probably the backbone of a lot of industries in the city of Annapolis when you look deeply. And the importance of the correlation between the African American population and the newly, and really not that new, but the immigrant population from Central America and Mexico, have all had the exact same struggles as newer immigrant populations, which includes affordable housing and communities that are safe, and also an embrace for the larger culture to embrace their culture, which includes language. And what illustrates the importance of culture is if you look behind you on the wall there, and you ask, how many citizens does that really reflect? And then you also look at the fact that it says settled and chartered. Those are all cultural-based things that either marginalize populations or they bring people together. So to end this, I want to have a couple bullet points from some of the work that I'm doing with the ACLU. And in particular, it says that Annapolis is diverse, and we do know that. And it deserves to treat all of its citizens fairly. And we also must remember that given the current political climate nationally and President Trump's promise to target vulnerable non-citizen communities, which he has actually said, right? We must take steps to ensure that our residents in this city, that they understand that we don't espouse that particular ideology, right? Because we believe in a prosperous, caring community. Also, that enacting a foreign policy, a formal policy and law that protects all residents of Annapolis from discrimination will also allow officers to build trust in diverse neighborhoods, which dovetails into, if you all recall, our previous recommendations, right? Our policy recommendations, which is we're talking about policing and how they form, partnerships with the communities they serve. So this is an important step for that. So I commend you all, Councilman Littman, Pfeiffer, and Mark. He may not be in the room, but Mark, good job. So we have a responsibility to protect and serve our most vulnerable residents, not just its citizen residents. So we have to remember that. And then I want to end it with a quote, and then I'm out of here. And I'll say who it is at the end of it. We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our communities. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others for their sakes and for our own. And who do you think said that? Cesar Chavez. Yes. Thank you all.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, councilmen, esteemed councilmen and women, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us on this rather important issue today. And I apologize in advance, I've been fighting a head cold, so I sound like I've got snot in my head because I do. I have a distinct perspective on this. I was a double immigrant. At age 2, I was born in Mississippi, but at age 2, my mother decided, my parents separated, and my mother decided to move to India. So she picked me up, and we moved to India, and I grew up in a culture that I did not know. I learned all about it, learned to get great Indian food, became trilingual, went through the school system, and really understood through my entire life that I was different. I didn't really fit in. I was taller than most of my peers. I looked different. And I had a strange name. I was called Donald. You know, they never really could pronounce my name. And so, in 1999, my mother was one of the first people who got on the internet, met my stepfather. They've been married for 20 years now, almost 20 years, and got married. Well, Immigration and Nationalization Services said, well, that's not possible. You can't meet somebody online and get married. It's fake. You're trying to sneak into the country illegally. Bear in mind, I was a U.S. citizen at the time, but my mom wasn't. She came back, got married. She's a citizen today, and I spent from 98 to 99, I spent a year with my 9-year-old sister in a foreign country waiting for Immigration and Nationalization Services to be able to allow her to come legally. It was one of the hardest things she ever did, and many of you have met my sister. And today, she lives in La Puente, California. We have to make sure that we never forget where we came from. When I came to Annapolis almost 5 years ago now, it immediately struck me how culturally diverse and beautiful the city is. And this ordinance, and I thank you for putting it forward, allows us to continue to judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Thank you.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Council. My name is Lee Finney, and I live at 717 Warren Drive in Ward 8 in Eastport. I am here to strongly urge the City Council to vote in favor of O-117, as I believe this ordinance will make us all safer, in addition to being the right thing to do, as others have said, for Annapolis community cohesiveness. As I understand it, this ordinance will add to existing code language with respect to the conduct of city employees and add to existing non-discrimination categories the additional non-discrimination based on immigration status and ability to speak English, as well as specifying what this will mean in the provision of city services and the investigation of city residents for other than criminal activities, except as may be required by law. This code change should enhance public safety in Annapolis, as it will provide the confidence that all residents can safely report crimes where they have been either victims or witnesses. Police often have difficulty getting witnesses to crimes to agree to testify when residents fear that either they or a member of their family may be exposed as undocumented and deported. For many, a much worse outcome than simply accepting being the victim of a crime or allowing a criminal to go unprosecuted for lack of witnesses. In fact, the lack of such safety to report crimes to the police often makes undocumented residents much more likely to be the targets of opportunistic crime and easy prey for criminals who know that their victims will be unlikely to report their crime. Our city should provide public safety for all its residents. Allowing one group of residents to be isolated and easy targets for criminals makes all of us less safe. Any crimes that go unprosecuted make all the city less safe. I do not believe that Annapolis crime statistics will show a disproportionate amount of crime being committed by undocumented residents, although they may show a disproportionate amount of crime being committed against undocumented residents. There is no evidence that extending equal rights to all residents will cause the city to become a magnet for criminals. As noted already, the opposite is likely to be in effect. Annapolis already has a culturally diverse population that enriches our community. So it is time to recognize the fears that may be keeping some of our neighbors from participating fully in civic life and in cooperating fully with law enforcement. This ordinance does not make Annapolis a sanctuary city, as I understand that term has been applied to other cities, nor does it prohibit our police officers from the full exercise of their duties in any way. It should have the positive effect of making Annapolis a safer place to live for everyone. Plus, it is not only the smart thing to do, it is also the right thing to do. Thank you.
The next three people, Alice Kane, Jan Zangler, and Rachel Warren.
Good evening. I'm Alice Kane. I live at 426 Ferry Point Road here in Annapolis. I'm here to say thank you to Alderman Jared Littman, as well as Aldermen and Women Finlayson, Kirby, Pfeiffer, and Arnett for your leadership on the non-discrimination of foreign-born residents ordinance. There are many reasons why this is important for Annapolis's future. In the interest of time, I will limit my comments to just two. First, now is exactly the right time to expand our city's non-discrimination laws. We face a time of great fear and uncertainty among many members of our community, none more than immigrant and refugee families. I work at a nonprofit that runs teacher leadership programs in Maryland and 7 other states, and I previously taught recent immigrants and refugees in GED and ESOL programs. Since Election Day, my colleagues and I have heard from many teachers about enormous fear among their students and families. It got to the point that our CEO sent a thank you letter to teachers, and I want to quote briefly from it. She said, "You teachers have become a safe harbor to our most vulnerable students, to students of color, to students with special needs, to students who have immigrated from other nations when it is unclear how much you will be able to protect them. You have had to uphold their hopes for an American dream, even as your own belief in this nation and our future has been shaken. You have had to be the face of compassion, even as the larger world appears unkind. I see this ordinance as a way of sending a similar message to those in our community for whom the larger world appears particularly unkind these days. Second, when should discrimination ever be okay? A vote against this ordinance is actually a vote for discrimination, and the new army of activists that has been unleashed among us is watching. I rode a packed bus. I rode a packed bus with 40 or so women from Annapolis to Washington, D.C. on Saturday, most of whom have never been to a march before, much less to a city council meeting. I understand around 1,000 people held a similar march in our city and in over 650 cities around the world. A beautiful moment in D.C. occurred when Michael Moore asked who would stand with him in support of our Mexican brothers and sisters, and every hand went up as far as the eye could see. Mark my words, that was not a one-time thing. I believe it was a turning point that will yield much more civic engagement at all levels of government. We have each other's email addresses, we have each other's social media accounts, and I think it's safe to say we will use them to organize around our agenda of unity and inclusiveness for everyone. This ordinance meets that bar, and I think a number of us would work to try to defeat any member of the City Council who votes against the values that we marched for on Saturday. Now is the time for Annapolis to come together and support all of our neighbors, no matter where they were born, and to strengthen our community by facing our future together. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jane Zanger. I live at 1030 Old Bay Ridge Road in Annapolis. And I'm a member of the 120-member civic organization Showing Up for Racial Justice, Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. The following is a statement I will read on behalf of our membership. As residents, employees of, and visitors to the City of Annapolis, we respectfully implore you to support the ordinance to protect foreign-born residents from discrimination because of their country of origin, immigration status, or ability to speak English. Our expectation is that our capital city will lead the way in the quest for justice for all. We expect it to be stated clearly that persons from vulnerable populations will be treated as we ourselves would expect to be treated. This ordinance outlines a clear boundary for our first responders in interacting with foreign-born residents. Please enable our police officers and all first responders to be focused on the jobs of protecting and serving our municipality, not taking on the responsibilities of federal immigration officials. Our foreign-born neighbors should not fear summoning the help of police officers or any city agency because of their immigration status. Not passing this ordinance makes our city less safe. There is no impartial research revealing that foreign-born residents are the perpetrators of more crime than any other groups. To claim such as fact is an attempt to scapegoat a minority. Please pass the Non-Discrimination of Foreign-Born Residents Ordinance and ensure the continued safety of all. Enact this law because failure to do so renders members of our community vulnerable and leaves open the possibility that the job of our first responders will become even more complex. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Warren, and I live at 6 Porter Drive. I was born and raised in District 2. As a new mother to a 10-month-old baby asleep at home, hopefully, I'm often fearful for her future on many levels, but I have the privileged assurance that she will never be stopped on the streets of Annapolis for, quote, looking illegal. She'll never be harassed, questioned, or looked at with suspicion exactly because of her skin color. She's whiter than me, if that's possible. And her native tongue, which will be English when she learns how to talk. She will never fear to report being a victim of a crime to a police officer because of her own status. If this ordinance is not passed, many other mothers and fathers in Annapolis, your own neighbors and members of your community will not have that basic assurance. The worry of some people is that the safety of foreign-born people living in Annapolis will take precedence over, quote, actual city residents. This kind of fear is unsubstantiated. This ordinance does not impede federal investigations, but simply sets strict standards on how our first responders conduct their job day to day. If our fellow foreign-born Annapolis residents receive suspicion, distrust, and fear simply for the color of their skin, what they wear, what language they speak, or where they were born, at what point does this kind of legalized suppression end? We often only care about the things that affect us and our family and friends directly, but as law changers and makers, and as men and women who put their lives on the line every day as first responders, your ultimate goal is community safety and advancement. But part of that safety for all should include those who are unable to speak for themselves for fear of being prosecuted. As elected leaders, you have the power to restore justice through the work you do on a daily basis in what can be an incredibly unjust world, including our own city. My guess is that you got into public service for that very reason. So by passing these amendments, you will be doing just that, service for the public. Thank you.
The next three speakers are Wayne Hicks, Patrick Leahardy, I hope I didn't kill that, and Yasmin Jamison.
Good evening. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
My name is Wayne Hicks. I live at 908 Beacon Square Court in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and Montgomery County. And I'm here with Showing Up for Racial Justice of Anne Arundel County and Annapolis. So I obviously don't live in Annapolis. I live and work in Montgomery County. But I wanted to come here to speak about the ordinance to protect immigrants from racial discrimination because I think it's important. I'm a PhD scientific researcher. I've had a life in scientific research, which can be very rewarding. One of the great benefits of a career in scientific research is that I can travel the world without ever leaving my lab. I've had the opportunity to meet, work with, and form relationships with people from all over the world. Scientists from Guam to Azerbaijan, from Ukraine to Yemen. These people come here because this country is a magnet for the intellect and the talents of the rest of the world. The United States is also a free society. They come here seeking that freedom. This country profits greatly from the intellectual capital and contributions of foreign-born scientists. They come to our shores to develop their careers, to support their families, and experience our way of life. And in the process of doing that, they contribute to the vibrancy of our communities, our health care, our readiness to meet threats from emerging diseases, and our national security. Following the recent election, I was asked by a colleague who's here on a visa if I thought she would be safe. She was worried about all the talk of deportations. She's not alone. There are a lot of people like her, feeling what she feels. These people are wonderful people. They work hard, they give their sweat to this country, they pay their taxes, and they deserve to feel safe. This ordinance that provides protection from discrimination to foreign-born residents represents a substantive action. Annapolis, the capital of Maryland, of my home state, can provide a model that will hopefully be emulated throughout the state to provide foreign-born scientists with peace of mind as they pursue their careers and their lives. I hope this council will pass this ordinance and that my time here tonight will be well spent. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Patrick Flearty. I live at 105 Victor Parkway in Annapolis. That's Ward 7. I appear before you in support of the Non-Discrimination of Foreign-Born Residents ordinance currently under consideration by this body. It would prohibit city employees, including police, from questioning a person's immigration status unless doing so was required by law or otherwise deemed relevant. Aside from its benefit of encouraging trust between the police and residents who were born in other countries or speak a foreign language, the ordinance has a very personal importance to me. My wife and I volunteer at our local Georgetown East Elementary School, among other things working with the first graders on their monarch butterfly studies. Consequently, we have come to know and love many of these children. When we learned from one of the first grade teachers that following the recent November election, many of the Latino children arrived at school crying because they feared what might happen to them and their families, we were heartbroken. They were living in fear for their safety and their security. These are our neighbors. These are our children. They should not have to live in fear. The least we can do is demonstrate to them by way of this ordinance that they and all of our fellow citizens, at least in the city of Annapolis, will be treated fairly, equitably, and with respect. I ask that you keep these children and their families in your hearts as you consider this legislation. By adopting this ordinance, you will be demonstrating that our city is a place where all of our citizens are valued. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Alderman Kirby.
Hello. I'm a little emotional because the little girl there reminded of me when I was little. Anyway, my name is Yasmin Jameson. I live at 214 St. Anton's Way in Arnold, but my parents lived here in Hillsmere for 20 years. Okay, I'm a member of Surge, Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, and a Muslim American, and I'm here to support this ordinance. Even though I'm not a resident of the city, I uniquely understand the tension between immigrants and law enforcement because I'm a foreign-born citizen of the United States. My family came here from Turkey when I was 8 years old. And we were lucky enough to have our green cards when we came in 1975. We were always here legally and eventually gained our citizenship. Sorry. But even though we were here with the appropriate paperwork, my parents still feared being deported. And I can remember to this day the fear my mom always had when she saw a police officer got pulled over for some reason. She was even scared if like an official letter came from a lawyer or a court. And I always had to be at a very young age interpreting. I remember her saying, "Don't do anything bad, they can take you away." Sorry. She would say this even though we were legally here. And I was discussing this issue with my son earlier. And, just told him I was coming here. And he could even remember, he's 21, and he could even remember her fear. So this impacted our family. And I'm telling you this because I want you to know this tension exists. Even if it's unfair or distorted, please pass this ordinance because the job of the police should be to protect and help the citizens of this country, and that burdening them with the responsibility of determining who is or is not here legally is not only unfair to the citizens, but to the officers as well. How can we hope to build trust and respect between people and the police using tactics that engender mistrust and fear? Please help to build and improve relationships between police officers and immigrants rather than leave room for them to be further broken down. We should all remember that at some point our ancestors were all immigrants. We were here to make a better life for themselves and their children. Building walls between citizens and the police will not make us stronger. It will only cause more division, more distrust, and more anger. How can we hope to come together for the good of all people when the people whose job it is to serve and protect and help have to be more concerned with someone's status than doing their job? Thank you. Sorry.
The next three people signed up to speak: Walt Petchler, Diana Russell Pineda, and Rudy Rodriguez. All right. If they're not here, oh.
Good evening. My name is Diane Russell Pineda. I actually live in Crofton, 1707 Gunwood Place. The reason I am in favor of this new ordinance concerning non-discrimination of foreign residents is that I work as an interpreter for Hispanic parents and children with the county schools, and mostly Annapolis schools, where there is a large number of Hispanic children. Their hardworking and concerned parents need to know that the police force is not a cause for fear, but rather one they can trust. Parents need to know that they can ask a police officer for help and not be questioned for documentation. I worked in a Pennsylvania city a few years ago, although I've lived in Maryland for close to 40 years now. And so I worked in a Latino outreach program in a Pennsylvania city where immigrant and racial profiling became the norm with the police force. People were pulled over with requests to see immigrant status documentation. The officers would then call ICE, and those people in question would often be sent to for-profit detention centers. There were no hearings or due process, and the victims were often deported, leaving family and jobs behind. The violation of human rights is often the end result of ICE and the police forces coming to agreements through grants. It is wonderful to know that Annapolis hopefully will not want to proceed in that direction. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Rudy Rodriguez. I'm here in favor of this ordinance. I'm president of the board president for the Center of Help for the Centro de Ayuda. I've had the pleasure of meeting several of you all when you've come to our Noche Latina, which we're having again August 4th. So I encourage you to come. I just want to say thank you to all of you. I've been here, the first time I came here was in the late 60s, came back in the 70s, and have been a full-time resident since 1978, 1980. And I have to admit that this is one of the most warming cities that I've ever been in. I have never felt any sort of prejudice in this city. Now, that's not true of my father. My father was basically, he was taken out of school in 3rd grade, and I think some of the aldermen have heard, to do migrant labor between Texas and California. When he was 16, he was in the 3rd grade. When he was 16, he joined the U.S. Army and got an accelerated citizenship because he was willing to go into the war. Okay? They needed bodies. He wanted to be a citizen. And my family has never looked back since then. But I do remember when we were in Texas, when he came back after the war, he was in full uniform. We were driving from San Antonio to Del Rio, where I was born. We stopped at a hamburger stand, and he had his combat infantry badge on, and we had 3 or 4 kids, I forget how many we had at the time. And he walked up, and he told me, "Hijo, venga," come with me, son. So I went up there, and my dad's standing there, and he asked for hamburgers. The guy told him, "We don't serve Mexicans here." So no Cokes, no food, and drove the 150 miles from West Texas. Things have changed dramatically. When I went to medical school, mine was the 2nd class that had Mexican Americans. Now they are actually lobbied for because they come in, they become physicians, and they go back to the Rio Grande Valley. They go back out to El Paso. They go everywhere, and they're amazing people. This is completely different than what I was going to be talking about. But I just wanted to thank everybody for what they're doing. The numbers are pretty amazing. We have about 11.1 million undocumented Hispanics primarily in this country. We reached our peak in 2007 of 12.2. That number has been steady. Okay, of that, those kids. Let me just see what the numbers are. But there are over, I think, 4 million kids who were basically born in the United States who are U.S. citizens living in immigrant families where at least one of the parents is undocumented, which I think is amazing. So when you're talking about doing these things, first of all, it's going to cost a lot. and a lot of cities, a lot of families are going to have to be torn apart to get to do what has to do. For the center, we do everything we can to help them. We always will. Just to mention a few things, our mission is to assist Hispanic Latinos and other immigrants socially, educationally, and economically in order to become contributive citizens to Anne Arundel. We provide conflict resolution, translation, health, citizenship, education, employment services in Annapolis to immigrant and Latino and other immigrants. We try to inform and sensitize the community and local leaders about immigration and multicultural issues through establishing relationships. That was the idea behind Noche Latina, that we would have a bridge of culture, of food, of music, to have the two communities start to come together. And we hope to provide a better path and better future through education. We've got adult literacy, children through our English as a second language, citizenship classes. I think we've graduated 100 citizens since we started doing this. And one of the most heartwarming was a lady who was probably approaching at least 70. She got her citizenship. The whole room was filled with her family. She brought all the kids, this high all the way up. And it was a joyous event. I mean, it really made you feel good about what was going on because these people became citizenship. Yeah, we don't go out. We certainly don't try to find out what their status is. We provide help when we need to. We ask a small donation. Kind of the whole idea is to give a hand up and let them help themselves. We are not political. We will not judge. And we just have people, we're trying to reach their full potential. It's very similar. I worked in the emergency room for 40 years. And I made it my doctrine to never check insurance status because I was afraid that if you knew what the insurance status, because it would impact me financially, I was afraid that it would alter the care that I gave the patients that I got. They got the care they needed when they needed it, no matter what the reason was, whether it was self-inflicted or not. I don't think as a health provider or as a center...
I'm going to have to ask you to summarize. It's been 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll say good night. I just thank everybody here for what Annapolis is. It's incredible. Thank you.
The next three speakers, Laura Perry, the Reverend William Hathaway, and Alexis Viegas.
Hi, my name is Laura Willoughby Perry. My address is 418 Audrey Avenue in Brooklyn Park. However, I'm actually here representing a group. Before I go into the details and what we have to say, I've been in this community for almost 20 years, either living here in Annapolis or working out of it as a reporter at the Capitol, as executive director of several business groups. Today I am a writer, a foster parent, and I am part of the committee of the Comunidad Presbyteriana La Trinidad. Also in English, that's the Presbyterian community of the Trinity. We are an outreach ministry serving the Hispanic community in Anne Arundel County. We were formed by the 6 Presbyterian USA churches in Anne Arundel County, one of which is First Presbyterian Church right across from the street. We provide services and assistance to what we determined was a growing Hispanic population in Anne Arundel County. We appreciate the foresight and the knowledge that went into drawing up the legislation before you today, and we're here to urge you to pass it so that Annapolis can show its solidarity behind all its citizens, our friends, our family, and our co-workers who work, eat, and live in this community. A study our committee commissioned in 2014 estimated the Hispanic and Latino population in Annapolis at 18%. We do know that today that number could be as high as 20 to 25% statewide, so we know that it is the fastest growing population in this state. The Reverend Migday Lucas is our part-time pastor for the Presbyterian community of the Trinity, and he couldn't be here tonight. He's our part-time pastor, but he also has a part-time job working in the blue-collar services industry and trucking, so he's very much living the immigrant experience. Reverend Lucas tells me the Hispanic population in Annapolis is scared. They are fearful of the police. They're fearful that the police are ICE or will turn them in. They're fearful that their families, including members who have lived here for decades, will be divided by deportation. They're fearful that even though they are legally in the country, they will experience undue hardship in their own community because of the color of their skin, their accent, or their birthplace. The rhetoric of the campaign season has only increased this fear, but it did pre-exist it. Federal legislation outlawing this type of discrimination does indeed exist. However, as we've seen increasingly over the past few years, civil rights abuses happen on a local level. These same overreaches happen at the local level, and they often stay local. Those who have faced extra questioning, discrimination, and the erosion of their basic individual rights during traffic stops or even during daily interactions with governmental officials will often choose to remain silent rather than risk additional scrutiny and potentially persecution. The additions that you're considering to the City Code recognizes this very real fact, while aiming to put into systemic existence language that can leave no doubt to the underarching message. Annapolis government recognizes the divine humanness of all people that makes up its community. It helps protect a potentially vulnerable group of the community that makes Annapolis the rich, diverse, and supportive environment that makes this city unique. Dear alderwomen and men, this ordinance is one of peace, love, and acceptance for all residents of Annapolis, those who make the city a thriving community. Este es una ley de paz, de amor, and de aceptación. Making these changes to the City Code is a simple step you can take tonight to prove that Annapolis is the inclusive, caring community that I and my fellow committee members know it to be. With a vote in the positive, you can do your part to help start eradicating the very real fear the Hispanic community here in your backyard is experiencing every day. And I stand up here with me, supporting with me Reverend McDay Lucas, pastor, Betsy Jinkus, Annapolis resident and First Presbyterian Church member, Marty Clayton, a member of Woods Memorial Presbyterian Church, the Reverend Tim Stern of Ark and Dove Presbyterian Church in Odenton, Bill McWhitter, Prince of Peace Presbyterian Church member, Robin Crandall, Herondale Presbyterian Church, and with the support of the Reverend Bill Hathaway, who is the pastor of First Presbyterian Church and is sitting right over there. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your patience and listening to so many stories. I am Bill Hathaway. I live at 32 Franklin Street. I am also the pastor of First Presbyterian Church, your neighbor across the street. As a pastor, one of my principal jobs is to listen to individuals and their struggles and their joys. And because of the Reverend Lucas that you just heard about, and because of the STAIR tutoring program that our church sponsors working with second graders, I've had the chance to hear a bit more. And the truth is that many of our neighbors are scared. Our tutoring program works with second graders, and I've had tutors report to me saying, I'm listening in to 7-year-olds talking about their fear that their families will be torn apart, that their mom or dad will be sent away. And this is real. Now, the ordinance before you, obviously I'm urging you to pass. I mean, there's a question of substance and of optics, although I put optics in the kind of category of spirit. The substance, I'm not a lawyer. I find the substance actually a little thin. I might want something a bit stronger. But nonetheless, the optic, the spirit of it is important. And even though I heard tonight that this process started many months ago, the reality is that because of now, because of the election this fall, our community is particularly frightened. So this ordinance is particularly helpful now, and I urge you to support it and to send a message to our neighbors that we are listening. Thank you.
evening, Mayor, Councilmen, Councilwomen. My name is Alexis Villegas, and I live at 8 Edgewood Green Court. I'm in Ward 7. And as many of you know, I'm running for City Council in Ward 7. I'm surprised at this point, after so many speakers, which have had so many wonderful and supportive and knowledgeable things to provide to us tonight, that we haven't really touched on an important issue that goes along with this ordinance. I have many friends who are survivors of domestic violence. And when we are talking about issues of domestic violence, immigrant women are more likely to be abused, and they're more likely to be abused by abusers who threaten them with their immigration status. So we have the whole safety perspective, but one thing that we should add in there and consider, of course, is that there are women who are abused daily, who are unable to come forward or too afraid to come forward because their immigration status is questionable, or because someone in their house, their immigration status is questionable. If they know that they have the same rights and protections afforded to them, and that they don't have to worry that they'll be forced to leave the country with a child who's only ever known the United States, or forced to face life after their abuser alone without appropriate resources and protections, then they're not going to come forward. So I think as a woman in this great city and in this great state, it's important that we pass things like this that would provide additional protections to immigrant women who are more likely to be abused by passing this ordinance. So I thank you for your time.
The next three people signed up to speak: Rob Savijo, Margaret Cole, and the Reverend Ryan Sermons.
Thank you. I never heard Savijo before. I know my handwriting is atrocious. That's okay.
You wrote on the sheet Savidgo. Unless there's somebody else with that name, I ask you to write clear in the future.
That's what my teachers often said as well. So Rob Savage, 12 Windwhisper Lane, and I support this ordinance because I feel that it will make our community safer for all the reasons that have been mentioned by others earlier. I support this ordinance because I feel this is a huge step to helping build one Annapolis, a united Annapolis. And I know while Annapolis can't very well influence or really change federal immigration policy, we can take steps to ensure that all of our residents and neighbors are treated with respect and dignity. And I, for one, want to raise my 6-year-old son in a city that embraces diversity, embraces empathy, but also embraces compassion for everyone in the city. And so with that, I'll just say, I hope all of you will join us in building such an Annapolis. So thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name's Marguerite Cole. I live at 100A Edge Hill Road, Annapolis, Maryland. I am an immigrant. What do you see when you look at me? You see a white, reasonably well-to-do lady. Well, how lucky I am. I have experienced the immigrant experience. The immigrant experience is far-reaching and encompasses a lot of different kind of people. There are physicians, lawyers, people who work on the grounds, people who work in the Annapolis hospital. I have worked for over 30 years along with immigrants beside me. I have worked 2 jobs along with immigrants beside me, but I have never been in fear of being stopped on the street because of the way I look. This ordinance reads, non-discrimination of foreign-born residents. That is a very nice way of saying non-discrimination of people who have brown or black features. I have been very lucky in Annapolis. I have always been proud to say I live in Annapolis, and Annapolis has been very, very good to me. But I do want to say this is a very gentle way of saying we will not discriminate against people who don't look white. That's the be-all and end-all of it. And so I would urge the City Council and Mr. Mayor to pass this ordinance so that I can continue to be proud of this city and this country, that we do not discriminate against a white minority is what we are becoming. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, grace and peace be with you. My name is Ryan Sermons. I live at 38 Pleasant Street in Annapolis in Ward 2. I also serve as pastor of the United Church of Christ of Annapolis. Last time I stood up here 2 weeks ago, I shared a Bible verse noting about aliens being treated the same under legal code as those who are resident. And in the same spirit, I bring also a verse from Exodus chapter 23, verse 9. You shall not oppress a resident alien. You know the heart of an alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. You know the heart of an alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. We all have come from somewhere else to this place. We all have been in a place that we did not recognize as home. We all have come to create a new home in a new place. We have told and celebrated stories of our ancestors coming to this place to create this as a home. Some of those stories are hundreds of years old. My mother takes pride in being able to trace us to a signer of the Declaration of Independence. But some of those stories are only a few weeks old, coming to a place. Some of those stories are the ones that we heard from the delegate here growing up, becoming a delegate, and the pride that his parents had in him. A story that is being able to be shared with generations as they come to this place. One of the interesting things about this particular verse from Exodus is that it's part of a series of decrees, including do not kill the innocent and those in the right. Do not follow the majority in wrongdoing. Keep far from lying. Do not accept bribes. It would seem as if it would be a series of decrees that would not be connected, would it not be for one thing. These are rules for how to live in society together. This decree, not to oppress the resident alien, not to treat them differently, not to have different standards of law for them, is very much a part of what it is to be in good governance, and that is what this ordinance is about. It is about public safety. It is about building trust. It is about women and men being able to call their law enforcement professionals and know that they will be safe. It is about protecting women from domestic violence, as Alexis shared, because that is a real issue in our country. We do not even want to explore how many women have been raped in the time it has taken us to have this discussion. Opening up law enforcement, opening up those boundaries of trust, opening up this ordinance so that we know that no matter what, we can call the police when there are situations of danger to health and body and public safety, and not fear that our entire life could be ripped from us or the lives of those we love and those who have become our neighbors, is a foundational bedrock of what we need to be community together. I have been a resident of this city for only 3.5 years. I was here before when I went to college, and I saw just the city I wanted to see, but in these 3.5 years where now I am woven into the fabric of this city, I see one that is diverse, I see one that is rich, I see one that is poor, I see one that can be beautiful. This ordinance is a step towards making that happen, and I give you thanks that it is here before you, and I urge your consideration. And one thing I will also add, it has been a privilege over this evening and the evening 2 weeks ago to hear the personal stories of people whose hearts are being ripped open for us to see, to hear their stories of why this matters to them. Thank you.
The next three speakers are Suzanne Martin, Lori Pirelli, and Rachel Frentos.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Martin. I live at 118 Maple Drive in Annapolis and have lived here for 13 years. I am speaking today as the voice for a group of us that have started up called the Annapolis Residents for Civil Liberties. We are a group of over 130 members and are growing every day. Our group urges you to pass the non-discrimination ordinance for foreign-born residents. We realize this is not an easy decision for you to make. With the increase in homicides in Annapolis, we believe this ordinance is sending a message to our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters that they do not have to be fearful of approaching any city employee or city police officer to report a crime or to be a witness. We realize there are those opposing this ordinance. This ordinance, as we understand it, does not change the current practices of our city police, but what it does do, which we believe is desperately needed right now, is for our wonderful city to pass this ordinance, which we believe will improve the trust. It encourages immigrants to work with the police to prevent and solve crimes. For the police to do an effective job, they need to have the trust of our Hispanic and other communities. As Tom Manger, Chief of Police for Montgomery County, said, "To do our job, we must have the trust and respect of the communities we serve. We fail if the public fears their police and will not come forward when we need them." On Saturday, I listened to an immigration activist by the name of Sophie Cruz speak. She spoke in front of 500,000 people. She wasn't 60 years old or 40 years old or 20 years old. She is 6 years old. 6. She said, and I'm paraphrasing her, "I want to tell the children of immigrants not to be afraid because there are still many people that have their hearts filled with tenderness. I hope you are among them." Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lori Pirelli. I've been a resident of Eastport for more than 16 years. I am here to also, in addition to these many voices, speak in support of this ordinance. I'd like to start by providing some clarification. Those opposed to this ordinance, who have not spoken up yet, would use the term sanctuary city in relation to this ordinance. This is a misnomer when it is used to describe community policing policies that attempt to eliminate fear from those who worry that reporting a crime or interacting with local law enforcement could result in deportation. Some have confused sanctuary city policies with the notion that immigrants in these communities in our community are insulated from any immigration enforcement action against them. Even if this ordinance did propose Annapolis as a sanctuary city, and Mayor Panelides himself has said this ordinance does not do that, there is nothing in a so-called sanctuary city policy that prevents federal enforcement actions. I hope we can put to rest the fallacy of a sanctuary city and focus on what this ordinance does and does not do. This ordinance in no way provides protection for undocumented residents who commit a crime. Criminals, regardless of their status, will still be arrested and charged, and as our own police department has stated, the criminal activity of undocumented residents is reported to the government under the current law. This ordinance changes nothing in that regard. This ordinance does help to ease the burden on our officers and create a safer environment for our first responders by helping to build trust. According to the U.S. Department of Justice's guidance for building communities of trust, quote, lack of trust is one of the greatest obstacles faced by American policing and has a direct impact on the ability to address neighborhood issues of crime and disorder. Suzanne quoted Tom Manger, the chief of police for Montgomery County, talking about that to do their jobs, they must have the trust and respect of the communities. Whether we seek to stop child predators, drug dealers, rapists, or robbers, we need the full cooperation of victims and witnesses. Cooperation is not forthcoming from persons who see their police as immigration agents. When immigrants come to view their local police and sheriffs with distrust because they fear deportation, it creates conditions that encourage criminals to prey upon victims and witnesses alike. Law enforcement agencies and associations from across the country have echoed this sentiment by supporting community policing policies and opposing attempts by the federal government to mandate immigration enforcement cooperation. The Law Enforcement Immigration Task Force, comprised of police chiefs, sheriffs, commissioners, and lieutenants from across the country, said state and local law enforcement face tight budgets and should not be charged with the federal government's role in enforcing federal immigration laws. The U.S. Department of Justice's guidance for building communities of trust tells us, in the last 20 years, community policing has been acknowledged as the most effective policing strategy for addressing crime, building stronger crime-resistant communities, and increasing resident satisfaction with the quality of policing services in their neighborhood. The need for law enforcement officers to engage their communities to prevent crime is an ongoing priority, and forging trusting relationships serves as the foundation for improved communication. The importance of police officers establishing trusting relationships with communities, particularly our immigrant and minority communities, is critical if issues of crime are to be addressed in a manner that builds the confidence and trust of our community. These trusting relationships must be established prior to a crisis, so when a crisis does occur, the community will quickly come forth and offer assistance. Trust, transparency, and the protection of privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties are fundamental to effective crime control. These principles must serve as the foundation for efforts intended to support crime prevention activities. Law enforcement's obligation is not only to reduce crime, but also to do so fairly while protecting the rights of individuals. Any prevention strategy that unintentionally violates civil rights, compromises police legitimacy, or undermines trust is counterproductive from both an ethical and cost-benefit perspective. Ignoring these considerations can have both financial costs in terms of lawsuits and social costs in terms of loss of public support. I've put a lot of focus on the importance of trust, but there is one additional very important benefit that comes from increased trust: increased safety for our first responders. All too often, police are seen as the enemy, due in large part to a lack of understanding and a lack of trust. As many others have said, we are in a time of great distrust and uncertainty, and this is especially true for our immigrants. While Mayor Panelides has said he doesn't think the legislation is necessary, the many testimonials tonight make it clear it is necessary. Annapolis is a place of trust. We will not retaliate against anyone.
I'm going to have to ask you to summarize.
I am. Thank you. We will not retaliate against anyone who takes positive action to help improve our community. Everyone who lives here plays a part in making our community as crime-free as possible. The city of Annapolis will not propagate fear. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Frensos, and I live at 510 Beach Drive in Annapolis, and I also work full-time in downtown Annapolis. I am here to support the ordinance as well. In addition to all the reasons already so eloquently stated, and because as human beings it is the decent thing to do, I am here to address a more practical matter that benefits all citizens. When all residents and the law enforcement communicate, sorry, I'm so nervous, I hate public speaking. Sorry, when they communicate, it helps reduce crime, which in turn helps property values, which in turn benefits the city in terms of tax dollars. I've been in real estate for 15 years, and buyers will pay more money to have peace of mind. One of the most popular questions they ask is this area safe? So if human decency doesn't motivate you to support this ordinance, perhaps money will. Thank you.
The next three people signed up to speak are Megan Fink, Joanna Young, and Rick Kissel.
Hi, my name is Megan Fink. I live on 28 College Avenue in downtown Annapolis. I just moved here in November and I love it. I work for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm an environmental educator there, and making sure all of my students that come out to explore the Bay and learn about it feel safe in their communities across Maryland is deeply important to me. I'm not going to elaborate too much because every single point that I have wanted to make tonight has been beautifully said. I'm so proud and happy I came here to hear all these voices tonight. I feel very inspired. The bottom line for me is that we need to make sure all residents know they can come to and call on the police without fear of discrimination, and this makes us all safer. So thank you, City Council, for supporting the Non-Discrimination Against Foreign-Born Residents Ordinance. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Joanna Young. I live at 185 Prince George Street in Ward 1. And I too am just here to add my voice to all these wonderful stories and examples of why supporting this ordinance is a wonderful thing for our city. I guess all I'd like to say is that in this political climate, in the way that our immigrant population has been demonized and alienated, I think it's more important than ever to stand with our neighbors. And in this city of ours, this capital of our state, the way we treat our foreign-born neighbors matters, and justice for all matters. And thank you very much.
Hello and good evening, Mr. Mayor and alderpersons. My name is Rick Kissel. I live at 717 Warren Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. One of the several reasons that I urge you to vote in favor of 0117 is that it will reinforce the right of privacy that all people in this country are entitled to under amendments to the Constitution of the United States of America. Any interference with this right must be in accordance with established legal process. The right to privacy is not mentioned in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court has said that several of the amendments create this right. One of the amendments is the Fourth Amendment, which stops the police and other government agents from searching us, our property, without probable cause to believe that we have committed a crime. The only information that anyone is legally required to provide to law enforcement officers is their name and address. And I hope that that is remembered by anyone who sends anyone else on a witch hunt. Thank you.
The last person signed up to speak was Thomas Rivera.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tomas. I live on 106 2nd Street, Annapolis. And I just so grateful to be here today and hear all these great people talking. And, first of all, I apologize if my accent is not perfect. I heard someone say he's a second-level immigrant. Well, I'm a third-level immigrant. I went through Guatemala border, I went through Mexico border, and USA border. So I'm a 100% immigrant. And I'm so happy to hear that me and everybody else as immigrants will be able to call the police without fear, will be able to stick with our families without being afraid of at some point somebody's going to go one way and somebody else is going to go other way. And last thing I would love to say is if everybody else goes back when they were like 10, 11 years old, and the main thing on you is your family. And just think your family, your parents, your brothers and sisters, and your mom and dad has to go away because they don't have a legal status, but you can stay in the country, and your parents got to go back. So I think that's what everybody was saying when little kids, 7, 8, 10 years old, little kids are talking about being separated. Their main fear is that their parents can go back. And they have to go back because who's going to take care of them is not their parents. So if this bill pass, you will make a lot of people happy, a lot of parents happy, and a lot of kids happy. So, well, thank you very much, and that's it.
You can, yes.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Susan Peters. I live at 115 Spruce Lane in Annapolis. I work for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, helping adults earn their high school diplomas at a program called the National External Diploma Program. A lot of my clients are immigrants. I think if the Annapolis City Council talked with my clients and listened to their stories, the council would pass the Non-Discrimination of Foreign-Born Residents Ordinance. I think if you saw how hard they work to earn money to care for their families and how hard they work to earn their high school diplomas, you would pass the ordinance. I think if you recognize the ease with which we live here compared to the violence and devastation my clients have escaped, you would not want to add another layer of fear and hardship to their lives, and you would pass the ordinance. And probably the council would recognize each one of my clients as being human, a man or a woman standing in front of you with a sobering story, a will to work hard, and a deep appreciation of the opportunity they have to give back in this country. Mario would have loved to have stayed in Guatemala, and most surely would be there today if it weren't for the devastating U.S. foreign policy that caused corruption and violence to erupt. But that may be a speech to give to a different governing body. Mario is here now, and if he wasn't afraid to meet with the City Council, he would tell you about the choice he had. He could stay in Guatemala and most certainly be killed by the violent gangs he faced every day as he went to school, and tears would fill his eyes at the memory of his torture. He would tell you he chose instead the treacherous and uncertain journey to America, which included buying off people so they wouldn't kill him and walking for days through a desert and almost dying there. He would tell you about working 12 to 14 hours, 6 or 7 days a week here at low-wage jobs and paying his taxes with an IRS number, all the while fearing the police in the rearview mirror, but finally managing to scrape enough money together to be able to make the gut-wrenching choice to risk getting his son here. Most certainly your eyes would fill up this time as you attempt to imagine having to make that sort of decision for your own child. And then Mario's face would relax, and he would smile with his whole being as he shared with you how lucky he feels. The state of Maryland has allowed him to get a driver's license. Anne Arundel County has awarded him a high school diploma and enrolled his son in school. Surely, the city of Annapolis can lift a layer of fear off Mario's back by passing the Non-Discrimination of Foreign-Born Residents Ordinance. I thank you, and mostly, Mario thanks you.
Alderwoman Pendle-Charles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who's come out this evening to speak on behalf of this piece of legislation. As a whole, I'm in agreement and support with the tenor of this legislation. And I'll give you a little background that I think everyone needs to hear. During 2004 to 2005, I was the program manager for the Office of Minority Health. Part of my responsibility was supervising a very diverse staff. We made sure that the health information got out to the African American, the Latino, as well as the Asian communities. I currently, for the past 4.5 years, have worked in a 800 student school, which is extremely diverse. Many of our students come from, it's an elementary school, and many of our students come from immigrant families. As you know, I represent Ward 3, and we have many immigrants in my ward. I am in constant communication and with Ms. Karen Klein with the Center of Help, which offers many services in my ward. Someone mentioned domestic violence. For 8 years in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, I prosecuted physical child abuse cases as well as companion domestic violence cases. So I'm well aware of the domestic violence issues that plague us. I've had several conversations with Alderman Lippman concerning this piece of legislation. I think we all are sensitive to the rhetoric that we've heard recently in the campaign and has made many of us very fearful. Because of that, and because I see children every day in my school, like I said, it's an 800-student school, I, as an attorney, am very cognizant and aware of this legislation and whether it can pass muster, whether it can pass legal muster. And I think a lot of it is based on we want a piece of legislation that will pass muster because of the tenor of our country at this time. We don't want to pass something that may leave our city vulnerable or certain scrutiny, legal scrutiny. I think none of us wants that. I have talked to Mr. Leahy, who's our city attorney, most recently this evening before this meeting started. Mr. Leahy has prepared another piece of legislation that I believe and he believes will stand up to any legal scrutiny that may come our way. I have had an opportunity to review it as a cursory matter. I mentioned this to Alderman Lippman before we came here. But I think that's extremely important during this day and time, that we take a look at a piece of legislation that we know will stand up to the scrutiny and the legality that we all want to make sure that we can do. We talked about property values, and I heard that mentioned as well, and I think that's part of this holistic approach to looking at something that will stand up. So therefore, I will probably, once I take a better look at the legislation that Mr. Leahy, our city attorney, has prepared, and offer that. One thing I do want to say is we as city council members and the mayor, we hire a stellar staff to represent us legally. And I think, although I am an attorney, I'm not the city attorney. That is not my job. My job is to look and to defer to a person who knows much more about it than I do. And I have mentioned to Mr. Leahy, and I've mentioned to several people, and I will say this in front of everyone. When I was in the state's attorney's office, I trained and hired hundreds of attorneys, including 11 who have since been elevated to judgeships, including district court, Circuit Court, Court of Special Appeals, as well as the Court of Appeals. And I'm very proud of them coming through my training. And I will say this, that Mr. Leahy, and I've had many conversations with him about many different things, I find him to be one of the best legal minds that I've ever worked with. And so I'm going to defer and take a look at that legislation when I have more time to look at it. Now, no disparagement to the legislation that Mr. Lippman has offered. And like I said from the beginning, the tenor of this legislation and what we're trying to accomplish, I definitely support for all the reasons I've given you this evening. But I want to make sure that it stands up to legal scrutiny, because we're in a time and in a country where everyone is fearful of what may happen and what we've heard over the past several months. So that's my take on what I've heard and what has occurred, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. This is the last chance to speak, so please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Doug Smith. My wife and I reside at 5 Rebel Street. I'd like to speak from 2 points of view, one as a resident and second as a member of the STAIR organization that you heard from Mr. Hathaway earlier this evening. Speaking as a resident, I very much support this legislation. Our foreign-born residents are a wonderful, valuable asset to our community. So I want them to feel welcomed, and I think this legislation makes a good step in that direction. Regardless of how people got here, there are basic human services that they need to be able to take advantage of. So all the good reasons we heard tonight about people feeling comfortable to come forward and feel a part of this community, I echo that. Second, as a member of the STAIR organization, you heard Bill Hathaway talk about that group. We deal with 80 second graders right now, and as tutors, when we spend Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon with these kids, we hear a lot of things. And I can tell you, many of the students, and 41% of our students are Hispanic, they're concerned about what might happen to their parents. You might think adults are the only ones dealing with this and worrying about it. No. The adults, yes, and kids as young as second grade are worrying about this as well. Give you an example. We have celebrations throughout the year to champion the progress these second graders make with their reading. It takes us most of the year to get the Hispanic families comfortable in coming to these celebrations. They need to feel that we're there to do one thing, teach them reading. We're not there to ask them about immigration status. It takes us most of the year, and we feel very good at the end of June when these kids are graduating with their reading skills, that we get a good turnout from parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. So I encourage you to support this legislation, and it makes a step in the right direction to have people feel they are welcomed and accepted in this community. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and my fellow Annapolitans. First of all, I'd like to say how proud I am to live amongst so many thoughtful and caring people. The testimonies have been amazing. I first moved to Annapolis 23 years ago. I lived here for 4 years.
Sir, your name, please.
I'm sorry, my name is Barton O'Brien, and I live at 22 Cornhill Street. And as I was saying, I moved here 23 years ago. I stayed for 4 years and resided on the other side of the wall. And as many of you know, midshipmen are required to read the newspaper every morning. I didn't read the Post or the Times, I read the Capitol. And one thing I definitely do not remember is reading about violent crime in Annapolis. Now, that was a long time ago. I've got a lot more gray hair. But I was given the opportunity to move back to Annapolis this past year, and now I'm proud to call it my home. And it's changed a lot. The one thing that's really struck me is opening the Capitol every morning and on a weekly and sometimes daily basis, seeing violent crime that happens in and around Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. Excuse me. And, you know, we're talking straight up homicide. Last year we had 10 homicides, and that's shocking. And this year we're already on pace. And I know that crime prevention is one of the top priorities of this body and of all of us that are living here. And that's what I'd like to frame my argument around. I've been kind of obsessed with this. I've been doing a lot of reading about community policing and neighborhood crime prevention, and there's certainly no shortage of literature on the subject, and no matter what the source, they all arrive at one basic consensus, and that is it starts with community involvement. The citizens within the community getting involved, and at the same time, the police engaging those citizens. But before that can happen, they need to build a foundation of trust. And that's exactly what this legislation does. It allows the police to build an environment where there's enough trust to allow that meaningful engagement to occur. And this is really consistent with my own experience as a Marine who served 3 combat tours in Iraq. I can tell you, whether you're trying to prevent someone from detonating a suicide bomb in Ramadi or trying to prevent a drug-related homicide here in Annapolis, it all starts with engaging with the community and building trust. And so I asked myself, why is this legislation necessary? Why now? And we've heard a lot of testimony this evening where a lot of people have expressed fear, which I think is very palpable and very real, that exists within the immigrant community. And, you know, whether you're documented or undocumented, that fear exists. And I've heard people dismiss this as saying, yeah, but they're really not going to change anything. But put yourself in the shoes of the undocumented immigrant who turns on the television and sees the new President of the United States say, and I quote, "They've got to go, they've all got to go, the good ones can come back, but they've all got to go." That's real. 2 minutes after that, he led a chant of "Build the wall to keep immigrants out." Now, I put myself in the shoes of an undocumented immigrant who maybe doesn't live in the best neighborhood, and maybe they've got a drug dealer that lives next door to them, and they know it, and he carries a gun, and they know it. And they want to pick up the phone and call the police, but they don't, because they're scared that any interaction with the police, regardless of how good of their intentions, will result in them getting sent away, or maybe a member of their family getting sent away. And I can't imagine what it must be like to live like that. And I also put myself in the shoes of, you know, the local police officer who's just trying to do his job, who's trying to engage with the community. But whole segments of the population won't talk to him no matter what he does, because they're scared of him. And I can't imagine how hugely frustrating that must be. So what this legislation does is it sends a message. What it tells people is, if you see something suspicious in your neighborhood, if you see something that isn't right, you can pick up the phone, you can walk up to a police officer and not have to worry about them prosecuting you because of your immigration status. And that's what's going to facilitate the kind of trust that's required to have the kind of engagement in our communities that will lead to us preventing future crimes. And I think that's something that we can all support. So thank you.
If there's anyone else, this is your last opportunity. Seeing no movement, I declare the public hearing on O-117 closed. Alderman Budge?
Yeah, I would like to say quickly, I know we've been here a while, but I'd like to quickly thank all of you who came down tonight, and also I sent out a message to my email list over the weekend. Prior to this weekend, I had only heard from one resident of Ward 1 concerning this legislation, and I asked for further input, and thank all of you, both here and listening at home, for the many messages that you sent me and the overwhelming support that you sent for this bill. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to echo what Joe said. I expected an entirely different meeting tonight because my email was 3-to-1 people opposing this legislation. I did get a significant amount from people who were in favor of it, and then I noticed the addresses of all the people who were in favor of it were from Annapolis, and the ones who were opposing it were from Reisterstown or Western Maryland. There's no doubt what the sentiment of the Annapolis residents is, and this was very powerful stuff, and I certainly appreciate all I heard tonight, so thank you very much.
Alderman Kirby.
Mr. Mayor, my colleagues Joe and Ross, the same sentiments here. All of my comments were, lots of them were negatives. I did get some positives, but nobody from Annapolis sent me a negative comment. Not absolutely none. Reisterstown, Westminster, all over the place, other than little old Annapolis, and we capital city, so we're gonna do the right thing.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just wanted to obviously join in with everyone's comments. I think this was a great public hearing, lots of different strong testimony. I think for the benefit of folks here who probably are not usual suspects here at City Hall and sort of following our inner workings, it's probably worth noting what the process is now, that after the public hearing is held on any bill that's put before us, and Alderman Lippman's bill is before us tonight, it will go to our series of subcommittees, which are groups, small groups of each of us, at which point people can come and be heard in those settings sometimes. But it's a chance to really get into the substance of the bill, to make amendments. I heard tonight that there may be some amendments coming from the Office of Law and from Alderman Pindell Charles. I know there was some comments in the paper today from the mayor about wanting to really roll up his sleeves and get in there with amendments to try and clean up this legislation. So I look forward to seeing all of that. And after it goes through each of our committees, I don't know which committees it's going to, rules, it will basically come back for a vote and potential amendments in the public setting here. So just so for everyone following it closely, there's going to be other opportunities to see how this place unfolds. But thank you all for coming out tonight.
Alderman Livin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just be brief. I just want to thank everyone for coming out. I know it's tough to come out and speak in public, especially if you don't know what to expect and you haven't been here before. So I think it was very brave of everyone to come out, and I appreciate that you did. This is the legislative process, and it's very meaningful for us to hear everyone's comments. We'll take it all under consideration, and like Alderman Pfeiffer said, we'll go to rules next, and we'll deliberate amendments if any are forthcoming. So thank you all for coming out.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, I'm going to just say ditto what everyone else has already said, and request that the legislation also come to public safety, and maybe we can have a joint committee with rules so that we can all hear it at the same time. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Council will now take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 9:30. Item.
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-2-17 Water Service Agreement 44 Hudson Street, LLC.
We have one speaker signed up, Fred Delavan. If you state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
So the property, as I said, is owned by the ownership entity is 44 Hudson Street LLC. They've been in the process for the last year or so of developing this piece of property, and right now there's a commercial building under construction nearing completion on the property, and so it'll be ready for occupancy fairly soon. Recently, we approached the city about the possibility of obtaining city water service for this property. As I said, the property's in the county. It's already connected to county sewer, the county public sewer system. But there are some water issues with the property. They have the ability to dig a well, put in a very sophisticated water treatment system, and provide themselves with water. But it became evident that it was a lot easier and more cost-effective as the years go on to hook into city water. We approached the city about that, and we worked with the Department of Public Works and the City Office of Law, both of which were very accommodating, and I appreciate their efforts. We were able to conclude a temporary water service agreement, which allowed the property to actually hook into city water, and they did that. They paid the fees to hook in, put in the meter, do everything you're supposed to do that was approved and authorized by the Department of Public Works. So they are presently connected to city water. But in order for a permanent water service agreement to go into effect, it needs to be approved by ordinance. So we're before you this evening on 0217, which is the ordinance that would authorize the execution of this permanent water service agreement. So that's why we're here. So I would ask for your support for ordinance 0217. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the council?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this measure? Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on 0217 closed. Mr. City Attorney, will you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Ordinance 0-3-17, Annual City Budget Submission Dates.
There's nobody signed up to speak. If you'd like to address the council, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion in the chambers, I declare the public hearing on 0317 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is, it says ordinance, but I presume it's a resolution, R-3-17, Council Compensation Commission Recommendations.
Right. Scott McMullen, if you could join us, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. This is Scott McMullen, 1225 Gemini Drive. This has been a good night for me. I'm on the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and the Compensation Review Commission, which is composed of Faye Curry, who's in the audience. If you could stand up or wave to everyone. I think everyone knows you. She's amazing. Former Mayor Richard Hillman, who's in Florida right now. He's out of state. Frank Parent, and my friend Carol Henson. We're all in the commission. We had 5 public meetings, which I missed the last one, so I got I was nominated to present to you all. And we also had a hearing, a public hearing, and which actually no one came to testify. This is what we reviewed as the Compensation Commission. We reviewed previous compensation reports. We looked at similar jurisdictions' pay. We reviewed the duties of the position, and we looked at the relevant city charter and code. And I know you've all received a report and recommendation on this. Just a quick summary of what we recommended. We recommended to keep the mayor's salary at $98,000. We recommended to increase the alderperson's salary from $13,500 to $15,000, and we recommended to increase the city manager's salary range from 120 to 180 to 140 to 180. Thank you very much. We'd just like to thank Tricia Hopkins and Ashley Leonard for helping out the commission with this matter and this report and recommendation. So thank you very much, guys. Do you all have any questions at this time for us?
Alderman Littman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really more of a clarification from, Mr. Leahy probably can answer this, but Ms. Leonard clarified. This legislation actually is not proposing to change any of the commission recommendations or to adopt the recommendations. It's just to adopt the report. So eventually when we get to this on second reader and we adopt this. All we're saying is we accept the report. Just wanted to clarify that because I had some question about that.
Thank you very much.
A question, a follow-up?
Of course.
While she's coming up. And this is to City Attorney. So do we have to amend it to adopt the recommendations?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. You are going to accept the resolution into the record, and the changes that need to be made to the code will be presented to you in the form of an ordinance. The recommendations will be in an ordinance, and then you can amend the ordinance. You can only decrease their recommendations, and they can't be raised.
Okay, so there's another piece of legislation coming to enact the recommendations.
Right.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to add a component that was indicated that the $1,500 is to also be above the $15,000.
Right.
So the $1,500 is to be used for training. So that used to be a component that was used for supplies and expenses, but it's now $1,500. So that's an addition to the. That hasn't changed from previous. So 13.5 is now 15 and the 1,500. Just, I had some questions from some older persons regarding the 1,500. You want to speak on that, Scott? In the language.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yeah. In the past, the 1,500 could be used for education or other things.
Correct. And the or other things is to be picked up. We are suggesting in the additional increase. So you don't have to provide further explanation as to receipts and things of that nature. We heard all the people in testimonies that it can be cumbersome in holding on to your receipts, things of that nature, and you're really doing the work of the community. So we wanted to make sure that you weren't using your own dollars for your personal dollars, and you were being compensated for that. So that's what drove that increase.
I'm not clear about the increase. My understanding is that the $1,500 in the recommendation is to be used for training or, what does it say, other educational opportunities. In the past, those monies could also be used for things like your cell phone bill.
Yes, no, that's correct. I think the reasoning behind it was, if you look at like making a copy, sometimes you have personal use, sometimes you have potentially city use. And what we did was, when we were raising $13,500 to $15,000, we made that recommendation. We would want you to consider using that extra pay bump to go towards the copy. And we're thinking that when we're listening to you and reviewing other jurisdictions. So the pay bump of $1,500, we're hoping that goes towards potentially cell phone copies, that sort of thing. And then you also have the $1,500, so you can go to the conference in, I think it's Ocean City, and do some education and training. So I think that was our reasoning on that.
So it's really not a $1,500 bump, because you're expecting the council to use it for business supplies and other things that they
You
need.
certainly can. That was our reasoning. That's correct.
Okay, just want to be clear on what the recommendation is. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else from the public who would like to testify? Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R317 closed. Mr. City Attorney, will you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is legislative actions on second reader, beginning with Ordinance O-51-16, the conveyance of part of the unimproved portion of the city-owned right-of-way containing the road belt of Castlegate Drive to the Lydia May Grant Revocable Trust.
Is there a motion to adopt O-51-16 on first reader?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Is there a motion to adopt O-51-16 on third reader?
So moved.
Second. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panlady?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Bud?
C.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Pinnell Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Littman.
Aye.
Alderman Kirby.
Aye.
Alderman Phydo.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-52-16, the conveyance of part of the unimproved portion of the city-owned right-of-way containing the roadbed of Castlegate Drive to Lee et al. LLC.
Is there a motion to adopt O-5216 on second reader? Second. In discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Is there a motion to adopt O-5216 on third reader?
So moved.
Second. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panelidis.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
Alderman Bud.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Littman.
Aye.
Alderman Kirby.
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-50-16, Title 17, Buildings and Construction.
We had requests that this be postponed until all the amendments could be worked out. So in light of that, is there a motion to postpone O-5016 on second reader until the regular meeting of February 13th, 2007?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the proposed motion to postpone R-21-16, R-23-16, and R-24-16 to a date certain not to exceed 90 days.
This is similar to the other one. People still wanted time to discuss it, so it was brought to my attention. So is there a motion to postpone R-21-16, R-23-16, and R-24-16 until the second reader, until the special meeting on April 24th, 2017?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Discussion.
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, just like an update of this. When this came up on the draft agenda for today's date, I questioned why it was up for a second review because it hadn't gone to committees. My recollection is that the law office was handling negotiations from this from a while ago. As a sponsor, I haven't gotten any updates, let alone a member of council. I just want to be assured that when this comes back, we will have time to send this to committee review and have some discussion about what's going on. I'm in the dark, and I'm not opposed to anything. I just am in the dark to have any feeling about it one way or the other.
Since my return, I have not turned to this specifically. Mr. Elson had apparently been talking to attorneys representing these folks, and I promise you I will turn to it immediately and we'll get you some answers.
Okay, so we will get a chance to have back to regular committee review before it comes up for second reader.
I would hope so, yes, absolutely. I mean, that would be my goal.
Okay, thank you.
I believe the city clerk said it's gone to committees already. The reason it was on the schedule for today is we have to postpone it for 90 days. Otherwise, it dies.
The history says it's only been postponed by the committees.
Right.
That's what, yes, it's
Yeah.
postponed, yeah.
Right. So the committees haven't actually considered it for...
No.
It went
for
on your
substance.
agenda and you said postpone it,
Right.
so we,
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, it went to the committees and the committees took no action because you were waiting for something from the Office of Law.
And that's my point. Once the law office is done with whatever negotiations they're doing, I think it should go back to committees
Right,
for...
right, they will.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
But it seemed to be being consistent with what Virginia was just saying. She was saying committees already had their review.
No.
She said the committees postponed it.
No.
We asked for
It-
it to be.
and it'll go back to
postponed.
the committees. Okay.
Right.
That's my intent, yes.
Yeah.
They've never seen it yet. It was postponed, right.
The first time, right.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, will you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the agenda has been completed.
Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Make sure your mic's